right now, and that is the Trump administration releasing a new list of Chinese goods that could be hit with a 10% tariff. The list covering $200 billion in Chinese goods, ranging from seafood to tobacco, chemicals, handbags. Joining me now, New York Republican Congressman, House Ways and Means Committee member Tom Reed. Congressman, good to see you this morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on this morning.
And
Mary.
once again, we have to question whether or not we're going to see retaliation from China and this thing escalates. Your thoughts on what we're seeing underway right now from the Trump administration?
Well, clearly they're raising the stakes on both sides with the increase of the tariffs. But at the end of the day, we're going to hold China accountable. And I believe the president on his campaign made it very clear he was going to disrupt our trade relationship, not only with China, but with others across the world, looking for that fair and balanced trade opportunity. And my hope is that we ultimately lead to sitting down with China and working this out with a trade agreement that sets the table so that we can enforce the rules of trade, unlike what we have today, where it's kind of a nebulous relationship.
I feel like China is a different story than the rest of the world because of the theft. You know, it's this bizarre situation that we find ourselves in, that we are negotiating on what they're going to pay for, negotiating on tariffs, on trade that goes on at the same time that they're stealing from us. Right? It's just bizarre, and they won't admit that they're stealing from us. So really, is tariffs or is any of this going to be enough to really change China's behavior?
Well, that's why we do have to get them to the table to negotiate these provisions out. And look at the other unfair trade practices China's engaged in. Just look at their currency depreciation just occurred over the recent months. You know, they're manipulating their currency in order to get a trade advantage. They're looking at intellectual property theft, forcing us to put our ownership of our intellectual property in China so that they can take it long term. Those are things that have to be addressed for the long-term viability, not only of our country, but our workers and our factories here on American soil.
Yeah, I get that. But Congressman, how concerned are you about the effects that these tariffs are going to have on our economy? We're finally talking about 4% growth once again, and here we are putting tariffs in place that may very well cut into that growth.
Well, I see the economy only getting stronger, and so this is an opportunity with the economy in the U.S. being so strong. You're seeing these numbers that we haven't seen in decades, showing such strength in the U.S. economy. Now, I agree. There are going to be nobody wins in a long-term, protracted trade disagreement, and that's where we got to get to the table, force the stakes to be raised, to force China and others to say, okay, the U.S. is serious. There's new policies coming afoot, and let's get this taken care of as it should have been taken care of years ago.
So how far are you willing to go? I mean, there's talk out there that maybe there should be limits on investment from China, limits on the number of IPOs that China can do on the New York Stock Exchange. Are you willing to take it that far?
I think we have to be willing to disrupt the trade relationship. It's going to take some unique measures on the U.S.'s point of view as well as others. And I think at the end of the day, both sides recognize that. You got to remember, the U.S. economy is the largest economy in the world. Right. And for these folks to play with access to that market is something they don't have the will to do in long term. Just as nobody wins in a trade disagreement, what we need to do is force this, raise the stakes, get them to the table. And I think that's where we end this situation.
All right, that's a fair point. Congressman, I want to switch gears, ask you about the tax plan. Obviously, you're on House Ways and Means. I spoke with President Trump in an exclusive interview 2 weeks ago, and we talked about the potential for a second round of tax cuts. I want to get your take on it. Here's the president with me just a week and a half ago. Does the economy need even more stimulus? Are you looking for a phase 2 tax plan?
We're doing a phase 2. We'll be doing it probably in October, maybe a little sooner than that. And it'll be more of a middle class. We did a lot for the middle class, but this will be even more aimed at the middle class. One of the things we're thinking about is bringing the 21% down to 20%. And then for the most part, the rest of it would go right to the middle class.
Congressman, you're on Ways and Means Committee. Do you think it's realistic to get that done, taking the corporate rate from 21 to 20%?
I know we're going to move Tax Reform 2.0 in the House. On the committee, we've been working hard already to set the foundation to move this. And fundamentally, what we're looking at is both on the individual and corporate side. You know, we have these cliffs. We have these tax increases that are within windows the 5 to 7 years out. I think that, to me, should be fundamental mission number one. Remove these tax increases that are on the horizon and call out our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and say, look, we agree with you. Individuals, corporations, small businesses, no one should be looking at tax increases just because we have these artificial deadlines built into Tax Reform 1.0. Tax Reform 2.0 is where these folks need to stand with us to protect individuals and our Main Street economic engine of small business America in particular.
Okay, I get what you're saying. You're talking about making the tax cuts for individuals permanent. But what about the corporate rate that the president just referred to? He says he wants to take the corporate rate from 21% to 20%. Are you considering that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I make no bones about it. I support lowering the tax burden on all Americans. That means corporations, small businesses, and individuals. I think we are taxed way too much in this country overall. And so if we can reduce the tax burden for people, I think that's a good policy. And we're going to unleash even more economic might when we see these numbers already from Tax Reform 1.0 delivering its results that we knew it would happen. We're seeing this potentially as another opportunity to raise the economic engine of America to a higher level.
But how do you pay for it?
Well, that's the question that will be asked, and we're going to have a balanced debate about does the growth of these look at the economic engine, 4% growth.
Right.
No economist said that was going to occur. When you have growth of that level, if you have that type of magnitude of growth, that takes care of a lot of pay-fors, and just the bean counters don't take that into account in D.C. So let's deal with reality and not the bean counters of D.C. who are stuck into their bureaucratic model.
So you think that the growth will continue? You continue to say that the growth is going to pay for additional tax cuts then?
Oh, absolutely. I think long term, when you actually see the results of what tax reform has done, 4% growth. No one said we were going to beat 2% growth. All the economists told me impossible to see the growth we're seeing. That type of growth leads to a lot of revenue coming into the coffers. That means a lot of ability to pay for these tax reforms long term.
All right, let me move on. Ask you about immigration. A judge siding with the ACLU, saying that DNA testing is not necessary to reunite every family that's been separated. Do you think that will promote children crossing the border with adults other than their parents because you don't need to do the DNA testing anymore?
It's a real concern, and it's not just children coming without their parents. It's children being smuggled in for human trafficking. That's what people are missing in this debate. Yeah, most of these individuals, most of these kids are coming with their families, are coming with their parents. But even if it's 1% of those that are coming because they're being smuggled by human traffickers, don't we owe it to those kids and to ourselves here in America to protect us from those bad guys, to fix the immigration problem once and for all? That's why I'm a big advocate. Let us get it done in Congress. And to my colleagues, at least we had a vote in the House. Let's continue that effort to get to 218 and get it over to the Senate and the President's desk to fix this problem.
Why can't you get it done? Everybody keeps saying if Congress were to do their job, we wouldn't be sitting in this place on immigration.
Look, I'm going to continue to use my position as one of 435. I forced a vote with my colleagues on that discharge petition that forced a vote on immigration. I told our leadership this should have been addressed 6 months ago. We're going to have to deal with it again. It's not going away. And so to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, I say enough is enough of the politics. We're in campaign mode to a lot of folks that are worried about their re-election efforts. Don't worry about that. Do the right thing, and politics will take care of itself. And
by the way, I know that Kirstjen Nielsen was in Guatemala. Is that where most of the people are coming from? Where are most of the people coming from when they're coming to the border?
It's obviously coming on the southern border in particular you're referring to. It's not just Guatemala. It's the other Central American states as well as Mexico. So it's a mixture. But the bottom line is Guatemala is a problem, and that is why I think it's appropriate for U.S. representatives to be there to discuss with their leaders potential ways to solve it.
We will leave it there. Congressman, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on, Maria.
Congressman Tom Reed joining us there.